Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. And in February of 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm 80 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in New London, Connecticut.
New London, Connecticut?
I know, right?
Aren't you usually in Canberra, Australia?
Normally I would be, but this week we're actually getting ready for Keto Fest.
That's right.
And we're doing a mini Keto Fest in New London, Connecticut. And I should mention that I've been on a ketogenic diet since April of 2014. And when I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. And within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared. I've lost about 100 pounds. I've completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of our experiences thriving for years in nutritional ketosis.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully that might help a few people out there who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
Yeah, we're not doctors. We don't want to give anyone any medical advice, but we are keen to share our own experiences. We're actually both software developers, so we're not afraid of a little technical detail, are we, Carl?
No, Richard. No, Richard. No.
We have done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind that. We hope to share some of that research. Where possible, we intend to put links in the show notes to cite research supporting any claims that we make.
And you'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies.
Oh, yeah, that's a claim.
Absolutely. We love to cook and we love to eat.
Mm-hmm.
In every episode, we both share a keto recipe that cannot, will not, and shall not be ignored. So let's start podcast number 112. Jessica Turton, dietitian and scientist. Heard you say you're due for a little. So, Richard, do we have any apologies or corrections from last week's show?
Yeah, last week's show was Dr. Kenberry Rants. We actually have a correction from Ethan on the forums.
Okay.
Richard and Carl, I wanted to point out what I believe should be a correction to your episode 111. And in that episode, Dr. Kenberry did an amazing job of discussing the issues doctors have with recommending a ketogenic diet against the risk-averse standards. And he mentioned that the ADA diet has guidelines for tremendous numbers of carbs. And this is actually no longer completely correct.
Wow.
The ADA made changes recently, which I pointed out on the ketogenic forums a few months ago after a physical therapist friend told me about it. They no longer specify any specific number of carbohydrates for a person's diet. Now, that's actually remarkable.
That is remarkable.
When I was on a type 2 diet, I was told to eat 300 grams of carbs a day, no less.
Now, wait a minute. ADA stands in this context for American Diabetes Association, but it also stands for Australian Diabetes Association, right?
Well, actually, in Australia, it's called Diabetes Australia.
Oh, okay.
But they all get their data from the same people. So if the ADA, the American Diabetes Association, is making a change, then hopefully that will flow through to diabetes organizations all over the world.
And it's really interesting that, the change is coming so slowly. There's just kind of like the frog in the pot of boiling water, right?
Yeah. Well, they want it to be that way because if they make a dramatic change, then they're open to litigation. So they want to make slow, slight changes in the right direction.
Guess what? They're open to litigation anyway.
Yeah. So Ethan goes on to say, while it in no way says that anybody with type 2 diabetes should go on a ketogenic diet, and we know that they should, it does, however, list a low-carbohydrate diet as one of the options.
No kidding.
I know, right? That is remarkable. Ethan goes on to say, there's also advice from the ADA to make it count when you eat starchy foods. They even leave options for people to not eat grains at all. Wow. That's remarkable. So while the ADA's Create My Plate tool does not even give the option to reduce grains and starchy foods below 25% of your food intake, the tool itself is listed as just one of the many options for selecting food, along with low carbohydrate, vegan, Mediterranean, and other diets. Basically, the ADA now guides that the eating pattern that you can follow and sustain that meets your own diabetes goals will be the best option for you.
Wow, that is totally remarkable. How did we miss that? Thank you, Ethan.
They no longer mention any specific minimum or maximum carbohydrate, fat, or protein level.
Wow. I guess that's huge news.
Yeah, that's a heck of an errata, but it's not an errata on us.
Yeah, right.
That's an errata on the American Diabetes Association.
Well, and it's very, very good to hear that.
Yeah.
Very good to hear.
This is what we've been campaigning for from the get-go, that diabetics should be allowed and given information about low carbohydrate diets.
That's right.
I don't care if somebody says that they don't personally like a low carbohydrate diet. They think I should personally eat more fiber and whole grains and whatever, as long as they don't tell me that eating a low carb diet is dangerous. And that's what I was told when I was a diabetic. Right. And in fact, the opposite was true. A low carbohydrate diet reversed my diabetes.
Fantastic news.
So that's my errata for the day.
All right. Well, let's review what a ketogenic diet is. Ketogenic diet is any diet that puts you in a state of nutritional ketosis. This is essentially where you adapt your body from burning glucose as your primary fuel to burning fat as your primary fuel. Whether that fat is on your plate or on your body, doesn't matter. You produce ketone bodies, which is a byproduct of that, which helps fuel your body along with all those fatty acids. And there's a surefire way to get into nutritional ketosis.
Don't eat carbs.
Don't eat carbs.
No sugar, no starch.
No sugar, no starch. Replace all the sugar and starch in your diet with healthy fats. The unhealthy fats are vegetable oils, processed oils, that kind of stuff. Healthy fats would be animal fats. Did I mention animal fats?
Yeah.
And also, of course, avocados, coconut oil.
Yeah, monounsaturated fats like olive oil, avocado oil. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And a few nuts and stuff. So that's it in a nutshell.
As it were.
As it were. So how was your week, my friend?
Well, I'm in New London, Connecticut, so you've actually witnessed how my week has been. So I did a stupid thing when I flew out of Australia. So when I organised my flights, I'm flying from Canberra, which is it's on the east coast of Australia, and I was flying from there to LA to New York to come over to Connecticut. But I found a cheaper airfare for $20 cheaper if I flew via Perth. Now, flying to New York via Perth, it would be easier to go in the opposite direction, seriously.
That's like New York is where you live and Perth is like LA.
Yeah, so it's like going from New York to London via LA.
So you had to fly to Perth, fly back to Sydney,
I know, it's ridiculous.
and then fly on to LA and then on to New York.
But it was $20 cheaper.
No, but the thing is, you did it not to save money, obviously, but because you wanted to leave at night. You didn't want to get up way early in the morning. Yeah,
so the flight from LA to New York only happens once a day, and it's like 9 a.m. So to get there 2 hours before, just to make sure I get the flight, I've got to leave Canberra on the very first flight. And if I miss that flight, or if there's any reason the flight is delayed, then everything becomes, a mess. So, so it was actually turned out to be a decent thing, because I go the previous evening, and I've got my midterm exams the minute I get home. Literally, I get home on Thursday, and my first massive tutorial is on Friday.
So you get some quality study time.
Exactly. So I studied biology all the way to Perth and back
for $20.
Exactly. No, they paid me $20.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
For the privilege.
Yeah.
So that's how my week. I kind of was on a plane for a lot of my week.
Well, I'll fill people in on my story of the rest of how your week was here. We've been having a great time, of course. Yeah. Richard came here, and first thing we did is had a cigar and celebrate.
Well, we were celebrating the Kickstarter because, people say to me, "How can you be so bad to your body by having cigars?" This is like the second cigar I've had since Keto Fest.
Yeah.
So
it's a once in a while thing,
and only in America,
right? So we basically spent the week here prepping for Keto Mini Fest and Keto Fest, like we did some of each.
Yeah.
Now, Keto Mini Fest, as we were talking about earlier, is something that we want to try here in New London. Well, me anyway, but you being here at the first one is great. It's essentially a 4 or 5 hour event.
Right.
And it starts with a cocktail hour and then a cooking demonstration and then a dinner, like a sit-down dinner cooked by me and you, in this case,
that's right.
Both of us, with the guidance of Chef Robert from RD86, who's been teaching us a lot of great stuff.
Yeah.
And then we have a live Q&A with a keto doctor, celebrity, nutritionist, whatever. In this case, it's Dr. Ken Berry.
Right, from last week's show. And your doctor.
And my doctor.
Yeah.
So this is going to be great. The first telemedicine that I get with my doctor
will be live. In front of an audience.
Yeah. So I get to ask him a few questions first. No, I won't do that. And then after that, Megan Ramos agreed to come on, Zoom or Skype or whatever and answer a few questions. So So that's the formula, and we plan on doing this in New London every month.
Yeah, but the reason that we're doing this is to build a template so that people can have Keto mini fests or even the entire Keto Fest itself in their own hometown. So we're trying to put together a manifesto, a template, so that people can then reuse what we've learned about the process.
Now, nothing's stopping you from doing your own event without our manifesto. There's nothing wrong with that. No. But we're going to give you support if you follow our rules.
Absolutely. And if you want to call it a Keto Fest, you need to follow the template.
That's right. Mm-hmm. So you'll wait for more on that. We'll have that. That isn't published yet. We'll have more on that. Well, let's give away a mug, shall we?
Let's do that. Some loot.
Some loot.
Yar.
Yar. We ought to collect some different loot other than coffee mugs, some signed books or things like that. I think we'll do that.
Yeah, we'll do that sometime. Yeah.
But right now, we're giving away a coffee mug with our mugs on it, and to one lucky member of the Two Keto Dudes fan club. And if you want to join the fan club, it's free. It's easy. Just go to fanclub.2keto.com and answer a few questions and sign up. And you'll not only get a newsletter every once in a while when we feel like putting one out, but you'll be eligible to win something in every show.
Mm-hmm. So, Carl, who have we got this week?
All right. Well, this week's winner is Catherine Burney.
Congratulations, Catherine.
Congratulations.
You get a mug with our mugs on it.
You get the mug.
Yeah, and if you don't want to wait to win a mug, you can always buy one at gear.2keto.com and pick yourself up a T-shirt or other... No, I'm not going to say it. Other things.
Other things, yeah.
Chaps.
Nope, not going to say asses, chaps. Nope. And that brings us squarely to a segment that we call...
It's fun when we're doing it across from each other.
That's right. We can actually see each other in the studio.
We're usually doing it, one of us on the other side of the world.
One thing people might not know is that I actually have a recording studio where I record bands, and I've been recording my podcast for years. Mm. And I have these twin vocal booths, and there's, plexiglass between them, so they're isolated sound-wise, but we can see each other.
That's right.
And it's kind of a luxury being able to do that.
It's very nice. Yep.
All right, so here's my mail. It's from James Riedemann. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and then I'll tell the story. But he kind of tells it. He says, last week I attended a computer conference in Orlando, Florida, that Carl also attended. Mm-hmm. I saw him at the keynote address and introduced myself so that I could say thank you in person. In August of 2017, I saw a doctor after 18 months of blatantly ignoring my type 2 diabetes. I thought I'd been doing okay, but found my A1C was... ready for this? 13.7.
Wow.
Yeah.
James,
scary.
You were sick.
You were ready to lose toes.
Mm-hmm.
My blood pressure was high. My cholesterol numbers were not good.
Yeah.
In September, a coworker told me about Two Keto Dudes, and I started listening to the podcast. A little over 6 months later, I'm 60 pounds lighter.
Wow.
My blood pressure is normal.
Of course.
My cholesterol numbers are almost in the normal ranges. And we know what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not much. He says, give me one more blood test. But most importantly, with my doctor's knowledge, I've stopped taking both insulin and Victoza.
Wow.
Since I've dropped my A1C from that 13.7 reading to, get this, 5.6.
Booyah!
2/3, almost 2/3.
Better than that, you're normal.
Yeah.
You now have a normal blood glucose level, and you are below the point where you get worse.
Yes.
So you, in theory, your body should be able to create more beta cells than you destroy, and you should be getting better every day if you can keep your HbA1c under 5.7. So
and you'll avoid all those complications that people are afraid of.
Absolutely.
Which is, the big problem.
Yeah.
I shared the above story with Carl, and Andrew Duthie was also there, and he's one of our admins, and also a longtime .NET Rocks listener. Mm-hmm. Never mind, you don't need to know that. Whom I had also just met. These guys could not have been more friendly and supportive. I finally had my opportunity to shake Carl's hand and say thank you for my health, for providing a podcast that's both entertaining and informative, and for the recipes. Richard, I owe you the exact same thank you, but the handshake will have to wait for some future day.
Yeah. You're welcome, James. The reason that we're doing this is because we weren't given the information way back when we had diabetes, and that made us angry. And so we're doing this from a position of we really want to get this information out into people's hands. Yeah. So I'm going to give you a challenge. See if you can find 2 other type 2 diabetics and turn them onto this.
Yeah.
And when they, like you, turn their HbA1c back to a normal level, get them to find 2 more people. And
That's
if we can keep this whole thing going on, the laws of geometric progression are going to mean that we're going to take type 2 diabetics out from underneath the curse that they are.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't think James is going to have any problem doing that.
No.
So there's a lot of type 2 diabetics walking around.
Yep.
So that's my mail. Richard, what do you got?
So I've got one from Groversaurus on the forum, and he says, if you use the MyFitnessPal application, you might want to check whether the username and password combination that you use on that service is the same as any other service. If they are, then I recommend you change them now. Under Armour, the company behind MFP, MyFitnessPal, had their systems compromised, and we'll provide a link to that. I can definitely recommend using the website Have I Been Pwned? That's pwned.com. We'll put a link to that as well in the show notes. Use that service to check your email address, and I highly recommend the use of a password manager. My personal choice is LastPass, which has browser add-ins, Android, iOS, and Windows Phone apps, and yes, I've used all 4 versions of those. Personally, this is Richard speaking, I use 1Password, because I came originally from using a MacBook, and it used to be a Mac application.
Yeah.
But the idea of a password application means that you can use non-repeating passwords on websites, and so anyone who hacks Under Armour to get your MyFitnessPal data, they don't get then to be able to use the same username and password to log into all of the other sites that you use.
Now you just got to make sure that your password manager account doesn't get hacked and lock you out before you can control all of those things.
That's true. So you want to choose a good password manager, but you want to have long, unreproducible passwords. I mean, I can't remember any of my passwords except for the password application that I use.
Yeah. That's great. All right, so let's roll a recording that you did here, Richard, in Perth with Jessica Turton. And she's a dietitian, she's a scientist, she's a researcher, but we'll just let her tell her story and then we'll pick it up afterwards.
Okay, so I'm here with Jessica Turton. We're in low-carb Perth still. We've done a whole bunch of interviews from here. And Jessica did a presentation yesterday about some research that she's doing. She is a dietitian, and she's also a PhD student at the University of Sydney with Kieran Rooney.
Yes, Dr. Kieran Rooney.
Yes, and he's a well-known low-carb researcher in Australia, isn't he?
He is. Well, he's how I got into all of this myself. So he is actually a lecturer at the University of Sydney, and he's the Unit of Study Coordinator for the Exercise and Sports Science degree, which was my bachelor degree. So that's where I learned all about the role of insulin and fuel utilization, and I really sort of delved into carbohydrate restriction. So it's been awesome.
Because he is himself carbohydrate restricted. He is on a low-carb, healthy-fat diet.
Yes.
Did you know he was when he was teaching you?
No. So at the time, so this was my first year of my 5-year degree, and I didn't know anything about low carb back then. But I was interested in weight management and weight loss.
Right.
So when I learned about, all you need to do is just reduce insulin and then fat burning can be turned on, I was like, well, that just seems so logical. And so I dived into it and I learned more about Kieran because I think at this time he had a few videos online and he was on a few podcasts.
Right.
So I learned more about him, but, I was doing my nutrition of dietetics degree, which was a separate degree to the exercise and sports science one. So I sort of went on my own journey first. And then when I eventually came back to doing my master's, I got back in touch with him again because I knew he was, so knowledgeable in this world and I knew he was doing a lot of research in this world as well. And that's something I was so interested in. I just dived into the research, found it incredible, as you would know, especially for someone studying dietetics, right?
Well, that's interesting. Dietetics is such an evidence-based practice. And you were seeing the evidence that was leading you to the conclusion of a low carbohydrate diet, which ironically is something that's considered antithetical to the dietetic practice. So that's interesting because that must have taken a lot of personal risk on your part to observe that things didn't seem to be lining up the way that you were taught them.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about me, I suppose, is that So I did my 3-year undergraduate degree, which was exercise and sports science. So there was very little nutrition in that.
Gotcha.
It was very science-based.
Yeah.
And that's where I got into low carb. And I actually went on my own journey with low carb and found out how amazing it was for weight management, blood sugar regulation, energy, mentality, all those sorts of amazing things. So I was so deep into low carb, and then I had to do my Masters of Nutrition and Dietetics.
Right.
So it was a struggle in a way. Yeah, because I was one of those people that just questioned everything. So, you know, I really enjoyed my master's degree. Like, I loved it, but I was always questioning. So, you know, every time we learned about something, I was just like, well, why? You know, where's the evidence?
Right.
But I found this.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if my questioning approach was very supported.
Right.
So that's really what caused me to reach out to Kieran Rooney. I reached out to him again in my first year of my master's. So this is 4 years after that lecture with him.
Right.
And we really got talking, and he was really supportive throughout my master's degree because I just don't know. Like, I know low carb is so evidence-based, and this is what I was talking about in my talk yesterday. There's so much evidence for low-carb nutrition for obesity and type 2 diabetes, but I just don't think the dietitians are aware of it.
Right.
I just don't think they are. You know, I was pulled up a few times during my degree, and people would, you know, the lecturers would even say to me, you know, there's no evidence for what you're talking about, Jessica. There's no evidence for low-carb nutrition. And I was just like, what are you talking about?
Right.
I've seen it. Like, I'm not making this stuff up. I got into this through the evidence.
Were you able to produce the evidence for them, and were they able to? Did they recant, or did they?
No, I sort of took a slightly quieter approach eventually. So at the beginning, I was very much like, you know, stating my thoughts and questioning, and it wasn't well received.
Right.
So I sort of just went a little bit quiet, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do this degree. I'm going to take out as much as I can, because what a lot of people don't realize is we learn so much detail. Like, we go into so much detail about the science behind vitamins and minerals and medications and all these types of medical conditions. Like, it's a very intense degree, so I don't want to undermine that at all.
No.
I mean, there is a part where you learn about the Australian Dietary Guidelines, but that's like the first couple of weeks. So that's where I was really questioning things. But as I said in my talk yesterday, the Australian Dietary Guidelines don't apply to people with medical conditions.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, and that's the fault line where we can start to maybe, hopefully, see some change, because clearly we have now the Verta study that shows that it would be a malpractice not to offer a ketogenic diet to people who are type 2 diabetic, because like 90% of people, 90% of the subjects on that study were off their medication. You know, it's just outstanding, and 60% had seen a reversal in their diabetes, and so almost that study just by itself is sufficient to say that this should be available at least to diabetics. Well, if diabetics are not considered to be normal, then and the ADG, the Australian Dietary Guidelines, is based around only healthy, normal people, then clearly there's an opportunity for a new dietary guidelines available to diabetics, uniquely to diabetics, which, you know, could allow a ketogenic or low-carb diet. So
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I did a scholarship looking into a lot of the studies behind whole grain intake and cardiovascular disease, and these were the studies that are used as the evidence base for the dietary guidelines.
Right.
And when you look through those studies, they filter out everybody who's got insulin resistance, everyone who's over BMI 25, you know, so they're filtering out all the people that make up the bulk of our population. Like, let's be honest.
85% of us have this, are on this continuum. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, depending on when the study was designed, but still you sort of look through that and you're just like, well, that's great for somebody that's under BMI 25 and completely healthy.
Right.
And to be honest, like, I don't know if this is because I'm a dietitian or what, and the sort of people I surround myself with, but I don't really know anybody that doesn't have a risk factor like hypertension or high cholesterol
it's got to be
whatever.
like 90, 95%. I mean, mean, certainly only 1 in 20 people is perfectly healthy, really. So,
well, you know what I thought as well? I actually wouldn't have been included in one of those studies because my LDL is very high. So they would have kicked me right out.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So you actually have a family history of diabetes, don't you?
Yes, a very strong one.
Right.
All my grandparents had or have diabetes. Type 2. So 3 of my grandparents, so my mother's dad doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially it's very strong in my family. But I think the most interesting side is probably my dad's side. So my grandmother, she had peripheral neuropathy when she was very young.
Right.
So I think in her 60s she got it, and she didn't have diabetes at the time.
Yeah.
So she's, been on a crazy journey herself, weight gain and diabetes and any health condition under the sun. And so obviously my dad was predisposed to those types of things. And my dad's brother, so my uncle, actually died of a heart attack when he was in his late 30s.
Wow. Yeah.
So very young.
Yeah.
So it's very strong in the family. And my dad, he actually was on an interesting journey, and he is one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about this and so passionate about diabetes. So he was, he's been overweight for quite some time, and he knew, maybe sort of 10 years ago, he's like, something's not right. He was noticing he was very thirsty. He was noticing that he was getting a lot of weight around the middle, despite what he would do. So he was always going on a diet, always trying something new. Like, hats off to him. He does so much research and actually really looks into the science behind things and goes, yep, that's cool. I'm going to do it,
Yeah.
And he's tried so many diets over the years. And so I saw him struggling with his weight and all of those types of things. So that's one of the reasons I got into nutrition itself.
Okay.
But then what really caused me to be passionate about diabetes was when he ended up having a heart attack. So I think it was 2 years ago now, he ended up having a heart attack.
Yeah.
It was actually around the time he was getting married. So at the wedding, he was noticing he had some chest pain. And I mean, at the time, he thought he was healthy because he'd been to the doctor every single year saying, I think I've got diabetes. Like, I think something's wrong with me. So he was pretty much telling the doctor, like, look for diabetes, check it. I'm pretty sure I've got it.
But his glucose at that point wasn't elevated enough
His glucose was
to
normal.
meet the diagnostic criteria.
So they just did like a fasting glucose, right?
Right.
Fasting glucose. And was like, you're fine. Don't worry. And I didn't know anything about, insulin testing at the time. So I didn't even know my dad was going through a lot of this. And then, so he ended up having a heart attack. And this was within 6 months or 8 months of seeing a doctor who told him he was fine.
Wow.
Like, this could have been prevented. He was going to the doctor every single year. I mean, if only there was some better testing that was done, like an oral glucose tolerance test with insulin, would have got this ages ago. And I mean, his brother had a heart attack in his late 30s.
Right.
Why wasn't my dad getting all the testing that he could possibly get?
Some people just can have a heart attack out of the blue, and it could be a totally healthy person have a heart attack out of the blue. So it is something that can happen with no other criteria. But for the most part, somebody who's diabetic may not their glucose may not rise for 20 or 30 years after the beginning of the process, but their insulin is going up right from the get-go. And some of us, some of us get it in the womb. Insulin is a big molecule, can't get across the placental barrier, but the glucose can. So if mum is carrying a lot of glucose, the fetus is now developing, and their pancreas is having to produce adult amounts of insulin.
Yes.
And so they get an early start. So And so, you can pick that up with this craft test. You can do a craft test and pick these kinds of things up, as you know.
Yeah.
But it's just incredible. And then all of the things he's saying, that the neuropathy, your grandma's neuropathy that came through.
Well, he had it too. He had it when he was going to the doctor. He's like, I've got peripheral neuropathy.
Yeah.
So he had all the warning signs. I mean, he had all the warning signs of diabetes. He didn't have the warning signs of like insulin resistance. He was far gone past that, and they still didn't pick it up.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when he had his heart attack, so he had the stent and everything, and obviously he's fine, so he survived. But he had diabetes, and they found out, and sort of when they told him, he was just like, no, I don't have diabetes because I went to the doctor a few months ago. You told me I was fine. You don't just get it in 3 months.
No.
And they're like, yes, you do. Have a look at your sugars.
Yeah.
And they were through the roof.
Right.
And so it's really funny because my dad documents all his meals in hospital. Gosh, you should have seen what he was being fed.
Horrible, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness.
Hospital meals?
Yeah.
Yeah. Julie went to hospital once for an operation on her sinuses, and we interviewed all of the hospitals in Canberra to find one that was willing to do a ketogenic diet. And there was only one that was willing to do a ketogenic diet.
Yes, I remember this story.
And they refused to. In the end, they refused to do it unless she was an epileptic child under the medication of a doctor. But they had somebody standing over her, insisting, a big burly male nurse standing over her after her operation, making sure that she drank her orange juice and ate a sandwich.
Oh, my goodness.
And they wouldn't let her have a visitor until she did it. And she was like, she's extremely stubborn. And she was like, I'm not going to eat that.
Yeah.
And so I think she eventually ended up having to eat it. And then I had to smuggle cheese and
that's
stuff
classic.
in. So, yeah, hospital food is horrible. So he went through this whole poor bugger. Did he end up going? I guess he obviously went low carb, right?
Of course he did.
Good on him.
So he is really receptive to everything that I'm doing. So obviously when I found out all of this stuff, so I had been doing low carb myself at this time.
Right.
I hadn't really, been shouting it from the rooftops to my family, but they knew that I was doing something that was working because I was obviously losing weight and becoming healthier myself. So when I found out that this happened to my dad, he sent me, the text straight away. And I was like, oh my gosh. If my dad remembers, I literally wrote him like a 10-page dietary plan, which was basically reduced carbohydrate, because this was just after I'd spent a year between my bachelor and my master's degree, where for the whole year I was literally researching low carbohydrate nutrition. I was so stuck into everything. It was amazing. And so I sent him this plan, and because I was, he was now so invested in diet and health and nutrition, and he really wanted to improve his health, he was asking me about the science behind all of this. So he didn't want to just know about what do I eat, Jess. He wanted to know the science. Yeah. And so since then, he's been a massive advocate to his friends and family too. So, with him, he has been able to lose quite a bit of weight. He's still on his journey. So, it's only been a couple of years now, and it does take a lot of time to reverse those habits. And he's seeing an amazing doctor, Dr. David Lim. He's really supporting him through this. And it's just fantastic to see the turnaround, because, I almost think sometimes my dad could be a dietitian. Like, he's learned so much from me and so much himself that he's so educated in the science. And I think that's the key thing here. And we see that, from all the people turning up at the low carb down under events, that learning about the science behind this is what really is the driver to get people sort of interested in actually doing it. Because he knows that if he, like, for example, if he wants dessert, it's fine. He has dessert, but he does that with an informed decision, knowing his blood sugars are going to go high and knowing that he needs to maybe take some extra strategies to help them be lower the next day. So whether it's fasting after, or whether it's, planning the day appropriately so he's not having all these glucose spikes across the day. So I think it's just about making that informed decision. Some of us don't want to have, the goal isn't perfect health, you know, but it's just improved health so you can have a better quality of life. And I think that's what it's about for him.
I think that's it for me as well. I think weight loss was never a goal for me on the ketogenic diet. It was getting my glucose down, getting my insulin down, and getting my exposure to my blood vessels of insulin. And then, of course, all of the diabetic side effects, retinopathy, nephropathy, and neuropathy, and cardiovascular disease. All of those are like vascular damage from insulin, so and potentially glucose as well. Get those two down. I really didn't care if I lost weight, to be honest.
Exactly.
Because as long as I felt good and I feel great, and I certainly have lots of energy. And I should mention, we just did a ride. We did the bridge to bridge
in Perth.
In Perth, yeah. So
how long was that again? We rode
exactly an hour and 34 seconds. So I think
it was really nice.
Yeah, it was. So, but I for me, it was never the goal was never losing weight, and so I've never been obsessed by calories in or exercise out, as a model. But since I did the start of the podcast, I've I've met a lot of people who've been frustrated by that whole thing. So,
well, it's interesting you say that because that was definitely me. So, when I was in high school, essentially, I got very obsessed with calorie counting.
Right.
Very obsessed with calories in, calories out, like to the point where I was reducing calorie intake to 800 calories a day.
Wow.
And it took over my life. Like all I saw food, I just saw food as calories, nothing else.
Right.
And I was able to lose a lot of weight. But as you heard in my talk, so yesterday when I spoke, I said that I'd lost 20 kilos since finding low carb.
Sure.
But the journey before that was it was crazy, really. And that's really what has made me so passionate about this, what's happened to my family, but what's happened to me too. Because I got lost in that calorie counting obsessive world. And I lost a lot of weight when I was in my teens.
It works. I mean, it works to lose weight, but it's not all fat that you're losing. And it's...
Well, the thing is, I became a different person, We've heard about those starvational studies, and you can imagine I was eating 800 calories a day for a long time.
That's just not your metabolic rate would have lowered and adjusted, and
that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I became a different person, I think, because on the days where I couldn't hit my calorie target, I was mad. I was angry. It was my life. It's all I cared about. And so sort of what followed that was me trying to go, this is ridiculous. I eventually hit that point of realization where I was like, oh my gosh, I've lost a lot of weight. I'm not healthy anymore. I've a lot of the relationships in my family life had sort of turned on its head because people didn't know how to deal with me because all I cared about was calories.
Right.
And
sounds like you make a good dietitian though.
I would have been a great dietitian. I knew the calories in everything. Even if I had a bite of something, I would record how much calories was in that. It was obsessive. But the thing is, I ended up on that journey because I was trying to do the right thing.
Yes,
because
exactly.
I was told you have to look at calories and you have to look at calories in versus calories out.
And it makes sense because if you restrict the amount of calories that you're eating and increase the amount that are going out, in theory, the difference should be made up from body fat, and you should draw down body fat in theory.
Exactly. And, it really isn't sustainable, but I think something switched over in my mind and it became quite dangerous where I was really just obsessed with it. So it isn't sustainable, but for someone who only cared about calories and weight loss, it was in a very dangerous way. And when I hit that point of realization, I was like, I've got to stop this. I've got to gain some weight. I've got to be healthy again. It's not all about weight. And I was really lucky to hit that point of realization.
Yeah. A moment of clarity.
Clarity, exactly. But what followed that, because I only saw food as calories, I didn't know how to eat. I was just like, and my brain, because I was just only looking at food as a number, I didn't know what was healthy anymore. I didn't know what was going to satiate me. I didn't know what was going to fill me up. So I sort of got into a really vicious cycle of binge eating.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So it was awful. It was really bad. And if anyone, out there has experienced a binge eating disorder, they'll know, it's not just like at Christmas time where, you overindulge.
Right.
That's not it. It's when you become a completely different person.
Yeah.
And it was a really hard time because, I'd lost all this weight and I thought I was doing a good thing, but then I couldn't find my healthy weight. I didn't know what that was. I couldn't find my healthy diet. So then I went on this journey of just having no idea how to eat.
Right.
And that's how I put on all my weight. So I spoke at the talk how I said I've lost 20 kilos with low carb, high fat.
Yeah.
But that was after a journey of putting on about 35 kilos.
Wow.
So from my smallest point, I went up to about 86 or 88 kilos from binge eating and the sort of after effects of what calorie counting can do to you.
Right.
So that's why I'm so against calorie counting.
Yeah.
But it's also why I'm so passionate about LCHF. Because when I was at my heaviest point, and I'm quite tall, so I didn't look so overweight. It was quite well distributed.
You're tall. It looks like you could carry a lot more weight and still look slim.
Oh, yeah. So people are like, whoa, 20 kilos. But on me, I was definitely overweight. My BMI was probably 29, almost 30. But we were just talking this morning about how that doesn't matter, but still, just for people out there.
Well, my BMI is around about 30 as well. So
Yeah, so I wasn't excessive, but I was carrying extra weight. And when you consider that my weight before that was about 48 kilos, right? So that's a big jump.
Yes.
So when I was going into my first year of uni to learn to be a dietitian, and I was overweight.
Right.
And I didn't know how to eat.
That's not a good start.
It's not a good
and
start.
not knowing how to eat and really being confused about food in general.
I was so confused.
Yeah.
It wasn't even funny.
So do you think you went into dietetics then looking for some answers for that?
It's really funny because I feel that I'm very grateful for this, but I knew since I was like in year 9 that I wanted to be a dietitian.
Wow. Real vocation then.
Yeah. So I've always been, I started the whole calorie counting thing because I loved food and nutrition from a very young age, but it became dangerous for me through calorie counting and through the sort of, I guess, standard approach to weight loss. So it became really dangerous. And so that's why I knew I had to find an alternative way. And so when I was sitting in that biochemistry lecture in my first year, you know, probably like eating some carbohydrate at the time. And I learned about this. I was like, this just makes so much sense.
Right.
So I learned about insulin and I learned about how to access your fat stores, which I hadn't been able to do.
Yeah.
And so I just dived in and started doing LCHF for myself.
Yeah.
And that's how I was able to lose the weight and be the weight I am now.
And also to find satiety. I mean, you didn't know your satiety point, and LCHF is a really good way, because the nice thing about LCHF is that satiety tells you how much you should eat, and it feels good to be satiated. So
it was so good. And you know what? For someone who had a very big problem with binge eating, so I would eat food and just have no idea when to stop. And when I started doing higher fat eating, I was actually like, I can't eat anymore. I was actually, my brain was telling me, you're eating food, you can stop now. Yeah. Whereas for years before that, I'd never had that signal.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm obviously I have the same problem you do, the familial hyperinsulinemia. Yeah. And I back in the day, I used to be able to eat two large pizzas by myself, and you know, I didn't have an off switch. And if I eat now a fathead pizza, 2 slices. It used to be 2 large pizzas, now 2 slices, and I'm done. That's it. So and the satiety just works, and it works appropriately to keep it gets us each to the point that we need to be for our body weight. So
it's really amazing. And when I first started my journey with LCHF, because I was coming off a background of binge eating and still not knowing how much food was appropriate, I actually was eating about 5,000 or 6,000 calories, but doing a ketogenic sort of low carb approach and still able to lose weight. Yeah. So
it's incredible, really. I tell you a funny story. I have a dog called Bear who eats kangaroo mince and Philadelphia cream cheese. That's what he
Sounds
gets
like
fed.
A good diet.
It's a good diet. Yeah, it's a good diet for a dog. He eats. So I calculated how many calories he eats. He eats 1,600 calories a day.
Nice.
And I eat roughly 1,600 calories a day, and I'm 4 times his mass. He's only 26 kilograms, and he won't put on weight. He's a teenager, and we just have different metabolic rates, and we do different things with energy during the day.
Exactly.
And so it's fascinating, and yet he doesn't get the option of a satiety signal. He eats whatever's in the bowl. But my satiety signal is just getting me to the point of where I need to be and just keeping me there. And it's a higher BMI than, ideally if I was to look at BMIs, I might say, I wouldn't mind being down around between 20 and 25. That's not where my satiety wants me to be. So.
Well, that's the thing, because weight loss is great, yes, but what is so much more important, and I think for you as well, is the freedom from food that you get.
Yes.
Like, I was in this dieting cycle where my weight was just never stable and my mind was never stable. All I could think about was how many calories was in a food, what was that food going to do in terms of putting on body weight. All I could think about was just weight and calories. And then now to be able to just be so free from all that. Like yesterday, I didn't eat the whole day. I gave a presentation and my energy was just pumping and like I didn't even think about food. And it was just so amazing because like I know I've been LCHF for quite a while now, but when I originally switched over and started, I would usually binge eat once a day, right? So then when I started to realize that I wasn't binge eating, I was like, my life has changed. Even if I didn't lose weight, it would have just been totally worth it for me.
My brain's working differently now. My relationship to food has changed.
My relationship to food has changed. Like I can so confidently say like my relationship is so good with food right now. And I think I'm a different person too. Like if you asked my family, when I was going through that time, I was not a nice person to be around.
Okay.
Not a nice person.
I'll take your word for it.
But now, like, it's just so different. And I think that is the biggest win when it comes to this type of nutrition.
Yeah.
And so I'm never going back to calorie counting, and I would never suggest calorie counting to anyone because I know how toxic it can be.
Well, listeners, that's the considered authority of a dietitian.
100%.
Tell me about this study that you're working on now. You can't. The results are still embargoed, right?
So that's the systematic review that I did. So I was really lucky, actually. As part of my master's research degree, they let me do my own project.
Right.
So usually what happens is you just tack on to another PhD student that's already doing something. But because I'd been having a lot of meetings with Kieran, every time we spoke to each other, we'd talk about a study we wanted to do.
Right.
And so when it was coming out to my research component, I requested if I could do a study with him. And we decided, well, let's, most people don't think there's any evidence for low carb, or many people don't think there is. So let's review the evidence and let's bring it all together. And we actually found that that's already been done for pretty much everything. So it was already done for type 2, it was already done for obesity.
Yeah.
And well, we're like, we're not really showing anything new. The evidence is already out there. But then we realized there is a massive gap for type 1 diabetes.
Right, yeah.
There is just no research, or there was no high-quality systematic reviews anyway, to guide us in what amount of carbohydrate is optimal for this population,
right?
Where that should be the most important thing. I mean, people with type 1 diabetes, they can't tolerate carbohydrate. It's literally a disease of carbohydrate intolerance.
Yes.
And we haven't got any high-quality systematic reviews looking at the evidence.
Yeah. Wow.
So we're like, yep, we're going to be the first.
Fresh territory.
Yeah.
Lovely,
yeah. So we did a systematic review of all the studies investigating low carbohydrate diets for type 1. And we did our systematic review quite differently to what a lot of people do their systematic reviews like. So instead of just including randomized controlled trials, because we knew there was going to be like no evidence out there, right?
Yeah.
We included every study design. So if it was an N=1 case study, we got it. If it was a pre-post intervention study or a cohort study, observational study, like we knew that the evidence would be scarce. We're like, let's just get everything.
Collect it all up. And you got everything, whether it supported your hypothesis or not.
Oh, yeah. We didn't care.
You wanted to get everything and then put it through the filter and work out where you stood.
I am genuinely interested. I mean, we get taught as dietitians, to sort of go by what the person's already eating.
Right.
So whatever carbohydrate amount they're already eating, try and help them sort of just make it a bit more, I guess, controlled in terms of so that they can calculate their insulin dose properly. So we don't really get taught what the correct dose is. And I'm genuinely interested in finding that out. I mean, I know low carb is so good for so many things, but I also know that there's that sustainability aspect as well. And with type 1s, you can get diagnosed at a very young age.
Right. Yeah.
So it is important to actually have that open mind. And so we went in with an open mind, but we found some pretty amazing results. And I presented some of the studies at the low carb conference in Perth. And, we had a couple of N=1s in there, which is quite fun because we wouldn't have picked those up otherwise if we were doing just an RCT systematic review. So we picked up these N=1 and, one of them that I didn't actually present was Dr. Bernstein.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. His own on himself, yeah.
He published an N=1 on himself in 1980.
But why isn't that in the literature?
Nobody knows about it.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Wonderful,
so we're really excited about the way we did our systematic review because we think it kind of sets a bit of a standard for other people and particularly for areas that aren't well studied.
Yeah.
So, of course, for obesity, you can look at systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials and you can be like, yeah, that's cool. We've got lots of evidence. But for something like type 1 diabetes and carbohydrate restriction, there's no evidence. So you can't just rely on randomized controlled trials anymore.
Right.
As we heard yesterday, there's people out there that need help now. We can't wait for these $1 million randomized controlled trials to be done.
No.
We need to look at everything that we've got. So it was fun that we had some N=1s in there. I loved it because I'm an N=1er myself.
We both are. Yeah.
We both are.
Well, I'm not type 1, neither are you, but we're both
but in
the
our
low carb
own,
diet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Dr. Bernstein's study was really cool. He gave a lot of information about his insulin.
Yes.
And so he was able to reduce his exogenous insulin from 80 units per day, which is quite high, to 25 units per day.
Wow. Yeah.
And the most incredible result was how much his hypoglycemias went down. So he was having, I think he said, and I can't remember off the top of my head, it was between 2 and 5 severe hypoglycemic episodes a week.
Wow. I've only ever had one, and it was the scariest. Actually, no, 2 the scariest moments of my life. And this was when I was on anti-glycemic drugs. So,
yes.
In the early days, and I was on the high carb diet. The only way I've ever had hypoglycemic events was reactive hypoglycemia on the diet that they give you with 300 grams of carbs a day.
Oh, gosh. Yes. Well, I imagine I've never had a hypo, obviously, but I think it would be so scary.
Yeah.
And I've had a few patients actually tell me that they've had hypos in their car, and one of
Which can kill people.
Oh, yeah. So it's incredible. So he got his severe hypoglycemic events down to 2 a year.
Wow.
So amazing. And I mean, there are some amazing results coming out. So the systematic review we did has been provisionally accepted for publishing.
Okay.
So we're really excited. And when that does get published, we're going to spread it around so people can see.
We'll put it in the show notes. In
Fantastic.
fact, if it's pretty soon, we might actually hold back the podcast until it's available.
Yeah.
And we'll put it in the show notes so that everyone can read it, which is awesome.
Awesome.
Oh, well, thank you very much for spending time with us today. It's been a great interview, and you did a wonderful presentation yesterday. I know it was your first, and you were nervous.
You.
And you were standing in for Dr. Rooney, and you did a wonderful job. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank
great
you
study.
so much.
Yeah. Awesome.
Heard you say you're due for a little.
Wow, I'm blown away every time I hear a dietitian who has embraced low carb as a therapy. It's very rare.
We don't hear it very often. The last was Yuan in Australia, the rogue dietitian. She was our first dietitian. And I'm thinking that, I can only think of 2 other dietitians. There's Jennifer Elliott, who was banned from the ADA. She lost her accreditation.
Also in Australia.
And she lost her accreditation for recommending low-carb diets to type 2 diabetics. And then the other dietitian that I can think of is Jeff Volek.
Yeah, right.
Right, who's one of the premier researchers into low-carb diets.
Got to start at UConn.
Yeah, exactly.
University of Connecticut.
Yeah, University of Connecticut.
But yeah, I can't even tell you any other low-carb dietitians in America.
No.
I mean, it's very hard.
I just thought of one.
Yeah?
Dietitian Cassie.
Wow.
Now, she's an American dietitian who, in public, ripped up her dietetic credentials.
That's right. I remember her.
And she said one of her biggest problems is that her entire online identity, Dietitian Cassie, has dietitian in the name. So she found that very problematic.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing we've learned, and we learned this just last week from Ken Berry, is that when a physician or a healthcare provider has a personal crisis, like Jessica had 3 of her 4 grandparents were type 2 diabetic. Her dad became rapidly type 2 diabetic and had a heart attack, and she learned that was the only way that she could successfully keep weight off.
Yeah.
It's the personal epiphany, the personal journey that then they can then take into the rest of the world. There must be a lot of dietitians out there who have found that a low-carb diet has worked for them, but feel too afraid to talk about it.
And the fact is they just don't believe their patients, then when they tell them that...
they're non-compliant.
Yeah, they're non-compliant,
Right.
So we want to hear from more dietitians. We want to hear from people who know dietitians who are embracing low-carb. And let's prop them up a little bit.
Yeah, I have said this for many years, that dietitians will lead us out of this disaster, this type 2 diabetes disaster that we're in. But the first thing they have to do is work their own way out of their own dogma. So, yes.
Well, are you peckish, my friend?
I'm a little bit peckish. We've got to stop saying peckish.
I love that word, peckish. Are you hungry?
I'm feeling a little bit more puckish, actually.
Well, then let's share some recipes! You know what's great about doing that in the studio?
Yeah.
We have the compressor limiter, so I can scream as loud as I can.
Okay, let's try that compressor out.
All right. Well, I'll go first.
Sure.
Richard and I have a sort of a 1-2 punch that goes together, and it came from experience. And mine is a braised beef cheek. So we were on our way to Restaurant Depot to shop for Keto Mini Fest
Yeah.
just a couple of days ago, and I thought we would stop at this meat packing place, Westerly Meat Packing, because they have chicken skins, and we were planning on doing chicken skin crackers.
Yeah. How many? It was like $10 for like 2
10
kilos
pounds.
or something. $10.
$1 a pound, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but they had other meats and stuff, and so, what the heck? Let's check them out.
Sure.
And Richard sees the beef cheek. He says, "Oh, we got to have that."
So good.
So, beef cheek obviously is the cheek, the jowl of a cow or a steer.
Yeah.
And it's very kind of tough because it gets a lot of work.
Yeah, well, this is the muscle on a cow that works all the time.
Yeah.
I think for we know for mammals, the lower leg is also working a lot because they're standing and walking all the time. So, shanks are delicious and the lower leg is a delicious part of the animal.
But you got to cook them low and slow.
You do. And it's the same with the cheeks is continually moving the jaws to chew the cud.
Yeah.
And, when you think about it, the buttery parts of a cow are the muscles that do no work.
Right.
This is the
tenderloin.
fillet and tenderloin, But it's the ones that do all of the work that are the tastiest.
Yeah. So we're going to do this low and slow, and this is a braising method that works with any kind of tough meat. This beef cheek was just amazing, and it had really nice fat when it melted. Now, we did it in an Instapot.
We did.
So, but I've done this method with other tough meats, and it works really, really well. So what you're going to do is preheat your oven to 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you can go anywhere between that and 325, but if you want to do it low and slow, 250 is good.
Right.
So you want to salt and pepper your beef cheeks, maybe 2 to 3 pounds. It's whatever it comes in. Now you're going to make a mirepoix. So chop up 2 stalks of celery, 1 small onion. If you want a few carrots in there for flavor, that's okay. Yeah. But, just watch carrots. 2 bell peppers or capsicum in Australia, 4 cloves of garlic, some thyme, and chop all that stuff up. Now, you coat the bottom of a Dutch oven, and we use these Lodge cast iron Dutch ovens. They're great.
From Lodge, yeah.
Lodge, yeah. Coat the bottom of the Dutch oven with olive oil, and then you put it on high heat on the stovetop and get that smoking hot. And now you're going to sear the beef cheek on all sides until it's caramelized. It's about 3 minutes per side.
Yeah.
You want to get a nice crust on it.
This is actually for the flavor.
Yeah.
Because this is
the Maillard reaction.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So now you want to deglaze the pan with about a half a cup of dry red wine. And, scrape all the bits off the bottom if you got any.
Yeah.
Now add your veggies. Saute that up for about 4 minutes. Not a whole lot of time. And just place the beef cheek right on top of those veggies. Now you're going to put the cover on and cook that 250 for at least 5 hours. We did it in an Instapot in 2 hours, and it was still a little bit tough. It should have gone another 3.
If you use an Instant Pot, take it out after 2 hours, and try and stick a fork through it. And if the fork doesn't just slide in, if it meets some resistance, put it in for another hour. And what happens is all of that sort of connective tissue turns into gelatin, and it's delicious.
Yeah, and the same way with slow braising. If you can't stick a fork in it, just leave it in for a while.
Back in again.
Yeah. At that low temperature, it's going to just not 6-7 hours doesn't really matter.
Right.
Yeah. So now you want to take it out of the oven, remove the beef, and allow it to rest tented, meaning that you put some foil over it to keep it warm for about 5 minutes. And for what to do next, I give you Richard Morris.
So what I suggested we do is make a sauce called a beurre monté, which is montéing is a process of sort of adding fat to a hot sauce to make it glisten and thicken it slightly. And the French have this technique called beurre monté, which is using a butter monté. And it's essentially the trick is you can make a beurre monté with just water and butter. You put a little bit of boiling water on a pan. You take the temperature down so that it's no longer quite boiling, and then you whisk in little cubes of cold butter. And what happens is you end up with a thickened sauce.
And the water keeps it from burning, and that's the trick.
Right.
As it evaporates off, that butter just melts and it's delicious.
Yeah, and this is a technique that we saw Robert Ramsey doing at RD86.
Yeah, last night.
So what we did was we took all of the juices that came off the beef and the beef cheeks and all of the vegetables, and we put them in a blender.
Yep, magic bullet.
And we basically blitzed it to turn the vegetables. These vegetables have been cooking for 2 hours, so they just disappeared into nothing.
Yeah. So it became a little bit like a soup.
Yeah, and it was quite watery still because we'd added a little bit of water into the mixture to loosen it a bit. So what happens then is we added some cold butter cubes. So we cut cold butter into cubes and we added them to the blender and we blitzed it.
Yeah.
And this is the same technique. We're going to put links in the show notes of techniques for making beurre monté, but by adding butter, the butter thickened the sauce. And so it was like, what would you call it? It was like it felt like it had a gelatin in it, or
like a gravy texture almost. And so when you do this, you want to do it at the very end of the process, right before you're going to serve it.
Yeah.
And what Robert did last night was he actually added this beurre monté to the mirepoix soup mixture.
Stock, yeah.
That was really reduced, so it was really thick. And then he took the pork shanks, which we had for dinner last night, and just sort of swirled the butter around with it. Yeah. And it just made this glistening, thick gravy.
Wasn't it good?
It was delicious.
Yeah. So, but when we did beef cheeks, that was also delicious. The gravy was the best part of the beef cheek.
Absolutely.
So, this is all of the flavors coming out in the sauce, and then it's just the texture of the beef. Once all of that connective tissue in the beef turns into gelatin, it's like taking it's like taking a mouthful of I guess it's like gelatinous.
Yeah, it's
food,
like jelly,
and
almost.
It just coats the outside of your mouth. It's absolutely delicious,
and it breaks down just the right level. You don't have to chew it. Yeah. It's just delicious.
Exactly.
And that's it. That's a show, I guess. It's been a delicious week, and it's going to get even more so.
It sure
because we're on our way right now after recording this. This is Saturday. We're on our way to go back down to RD86 and have 30 people for our Keto Mini Fest.
Yeah, I just made 40 covers of poached salmon and also my fennel salad, which everyone raves about.
Yeah. And I've made 40 covers of beef short ribs. And they've been braised in much the same way, just in a more industrial process.
Yeah, delicious. Of course, if you have anything that you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something that you don't agree with, some more research that you found to support or refute anything that we've said, send it by email to dudes@2ketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter at 2ketodudes, on Instagram at 2ketodudes, and make sure to use the hashtag 2ketodudes.
And of course, if you want to join the free ketogenic forum, it's forum.2keto.com.
And if useless swag is your fancy, t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other junk with witty keto sayings on them, head over to gear.2keto.com.
And if you want a shot at getting some of that swag for free, join the 2 Keto Dudes fan club. You'll be eligible to win something in every show. Go to fanclub.2keto.com.
And if you feel like supporting our forums and all the podcasts we produce, including 2 Keto Dudes, Keto Woman with Daisy Brackenhall, The Obesity Code with Jason Fung and Megan Ramos, and coming up here, Keto Family and Keto Kids. Yes, we're still working on that, but we will get that going. If you want to support all that and our forums, think about making a monthly pledge on our Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com.
Or just hit the donate button on our website at www.2ketodudes.com, or just go to donate.2keto.com.
You can also see our podcasts and other videos on YouTube at youtube.2keto.com.
And if you haven't already, go leave us a review on our Apple Podcasts. That's how new people get to know about what we do.
2 Keto Dudes is brought to you by 2 Keto LLC, who strives to support the low-carb community with podcasts and other publications.
And Keto Fest.
And Keto Fests. And keep calm and keto on, my friend.
Yeah, keep calm and keto on, Carl.
All right, we'll see you guys next time on 2 Keto Dudes.